A young man uses the money he had set aside to buy a gift for his girlfriend to help an elderly couple who were being humiliated for not being able to pay their bill. In the days that follow, his life turns upside down. Lucas had always believed that doing the right thing was more important than anything else. At 14, he already possessed a wisdom that many adults were still striving to achieve. His brown eyes, always attentive and compassionate, seemed to see beyond appearances, straight into the hearts of people. On that summer afternoon, the air was heavy and humid in the small town of Porto Sereno. Lucas walked down the main street, his hands in the pockets of his faded jeans, his thoughts divided between the joy of finally having saved enough to buy a gift for his girlfriend Sofia and the anxiety of whether she would like what he had chosen. The sound of raised voices caught his attention as he passed by Carlito's restaurant, a family-owned establishment that had been a community gathering spot for decades. Lucas stopped, intrigued by the aggressive tone coming from inside the place. "You can't stay here if you can't pay." The rough, irritated voice belonged to Carlito, the restaurant owner. "I'm not running a charity." Lucas approached the entrance, his heart racing as he saw the scene unfolding. An elderly couple, both with gray hair and faces lined with age, were sitting at a table near the window. The lady was visibly shaking, silent tears streaming down her cheeks, while the gentleman, with trembling hands, rummaged through the pockets of his worn coat. "Please, sir," the elderly man pleaded, his voice weak and broken. "We had the money when we arrived. We don't understand what happened." Carlito, a burly man with a stained apron, slammed his fist on the table, making the utensils clatter. "I don't care what you had or didn't have. If you can't pay, you have to leave." Lucas felt a wave of indignation rise in his chest. Without a second thought, he walked into the restaurant, heading straight for the couple's table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm despite the nervousness he felt. "What's the problem here?" Carlito turned to Lucas, his face red with anger. "This is none of your business, kid. Go back to the street." But Lucas didn't move. He looked at the elderly couple, noticing the fear and shame in their eyes. "How much do they owe?" he asked, turning back to Carlito. The restaurant owner huffed. $80. But like I said, this is... Before Carlito could finish, Lucas pulled his wallet from his back pocket. His hands trembled slightly as he counted the bills. Money he had saved for months for Sofia's gift. Without hesitation, he handed the money to Carlito. "Here," Lucas said, his voice calm but his eyes shining with determination. "This should cover their bill." Silence fell over the restaurant. The other patrons, who had been pretending not to notice the commotion, now looked openly, surprised by the young man's gesture. Carlito stared for a moment before taking the money with a grunt. Lucas turned to the elderly couple, who looked at him with a mix of gratitude and astonishment. "It's all right now," he said gently. "You can finish your meal in peace." The elderly lady took Lucas's hand, gripping it tightly. "God bless you, young man," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "How can we thank you?" Lucas smiled, feeling a wave of warmth in his chest. "No need to thank me. Just promise you'll keep spreading kindness in the world." As he left the restaurant, Lucas knew he had done the right thing. However, a pang of worry hit him when he thought of Sofia and the gift he could no longer buy. He hoped she would understand, that she would see the importance of what he had done. Little did Lucas know that this act of kindness would be the catalyst for a journey that would change not only his life, but the lives of many others around him. Lucas's story was just beginning, and the challenges and rewards that awaited him would test his compassion, strength, and determination in ways he could never have imagined. Lucas went home that night with mixed feelings. The satisfaction of having helped the elderly couple was undeniable, but the anxiety about how he would explain the situation to Sofia weighed heavily on his chest. He spent the night tossing and turning in bed, imagining different scenarios for the next day, Sofia's birthday. The next morning, Lucas found Sofia at school. His heart raced as he saw her approaching, her long brown hair swaying gently with each step. He took a deep breath and began to explain what had happened. "Sofia, I don't have a gift for you," he started, his voice trembling slightly. But let me explain why. As Lucas recounted the events of the previous day, he watched Sophia's face closely. Initially, there was surprise in her green eyes, but soon that expression turned into something Lucas couldn't quite decipher. When he finished, there was a moment of silence that felt like an eternity. So, Sophia finally spoke, her voice strangely controlled. "You spent the money for my gift on strangers?" Lucas felt his stomach drop. I thought you'd understand. They needed help, Sophia." But Sophia didn't seem moved. Her eyes, usually warm, were now cold and distant. "Understand? Lucas, it was my birthday. You promised you'd give me something special. And now, nothing? But Sophia, I thought." "No, Lucas," she interrupted, her voice trembling with emotion. "You didn't think of me. You thought of yourself, of feeling like a hero. Well, congratulations. You're a hero to strangers, but a terrible boyfriend." With those words, Sophia turned her back and walked away, leaving Lucas stunned and confused in the school hallway. He wanted to run after her, explain better, make her understand. But something held him back. A voice inside him whispered that if she couldn't understand now, she might never understand. The days that followed were a blur for Lucas. Sophia avoided him at school, and his friends seemed divided on the issue. Some praised him for his selfless act, while others criticized him for ruining Sophia's birthday. It was during this turbulent time that Lucas received an unexpected visit. He was sitting on his porch, lost in thought, when he saw two familiar figures approaching. They were the elderly couple from the restaurant. "Hello, young man," said the elderly man, a gentle smile on his wrinkled face. "We hope we're not bothering you." Lucas quickly stood up, surprised and a bit confused. "No, not at all. How did you find me?" The lady smiled. "It's a small town, dear. It wasn't hard to ask around about the young hero from the restaurant." Lucas blushed at the compliment. "Please come in. Can I offer you something to drink?" As they settled into the modest living room of Lucas's home, the couple introduced themselves. The gentleman was Antonio, and his wife was Clara. "We came here for 2 reasons," Antonio began, his voice grave and serious. "First, to thank you again for your kindness, and second, to tell you something we discovered." Clara took Lucas's hand, her eyes shining with emotion. "My dear, we found out what happened to our money that day." Lucas leaned forward, intrigued. "What happened?" Antonio sighed heavily. "The restaurant owner's son, Gustavo, confessed to stealing our wallet while we were distracted. Apparently, he has drug problems and was desperate for money." Lucas was stunned by the revelation. "That's terrible. Did you talk to the police?" Clara shook her head. "We didn't want to cause more trouble. The boy's father, Carlito, came to us devastated. He offered to pay back double what was stolen and promised that his son would seek help. But that doesn't change the fact that you, a young man who barely knew us, sacrificed something important to help us," Antonio added. "That touched us deeply." Lucas felt a wave of emotion wash over him. "I did what anyone would do," he murmured. Clara smiled gently. "No, dear, you did what few would have the courage to do, and for that, we want to give something back." Lucas began to protest, but Antonio gently interrupted him. "Please, let us do this. It's not much, but we'd like you to accept it." The elderly man pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to Lucas. Inside was a sum of money, more than double what Lucas had spent at the restaurant. "I can't accept this," Lucas said, trying to return the envelope. Clara held his hand firmly. "Please accept it. Use it for something special, something that makes your heart smile." At that moment, Lucas felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just about the money, but about the impact that a simple act of kindness could have. He thought about Sophia, about how she hadn't understood his actions, and realized that perhaps they had different values. As he said goodbye to Antonio and Clara, promising to keep in touch, Lucas felt a new determination growing inside him. He didn't know exactly what the future held, but he was certain of one thing. He would continue to follow his heart no matter the cost. In the days that followed, Lucas found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The breakup with Sophia still hurt, but the visit from Antonio and Clara had renewed his faith in human kindness. He decided to use the money they gave him to start a small community project, an urban garden on the vacant lot behind the school. With the principal's permission and the help of a few enthusiastic classmates, Lucas began transforming the neglected space. Days of hard work followed, clearing the land, preparing the soil, planting seeds. Each drop of sweat seemed to wash away a bit of the heartache he felt. It was during one of these afternoons of work that Lucas noticed a girl watching them from the other side of the fence. She had curly hair and curious eyes, and she seemed fascinated by what they were doing. "Hi," Lucas called, waving to her. "Do you want to join us?" The girl hesitated for a moment before approaching. "I'm Beatrice," she introduced herself shyly. "What are you guys doing here?" Lucas smiled and explained the community garden project. Beatrice's eyes lit up with interest, and soon she was kneeling in the dirt, helping to plant lettuce seedlings. In the weeks that followed, Beatrice became a constant presence in the garden. Lucas learned that she was new to town, having recently moved with her mother after her parents' divorce. The garden became a refuge for her, a place where she could forget her problems and feel part of something greater. As summer progressed, the garden flourished, just like the friendship between Lucas and Beatrice. They spent hours talking about their hopes and dreams, sharing laughter, and at times tears. Lucas found himself thinking less and less about Sophia, and more about the girl with the bright smile who seemed to understand his values and worldview perfectly. One day, while harvesting the first ripe tomatoes, Beatrice looked at Lucas with a serious expression. "You know, Lucas," she began, "when we moved here I was so upset. I thought I'd hate this place. But now, well, I think I've found a home here, and it's all thanks to you and this garden." Lucas felt his heart race with her words. He started, but was interrupted by a shout from the entrance of the garden. "Lucas, Beatrice." It was Antonio, leaning on a cane with Clara by his side. "What a wonderful thing you've done here." The two teenagers ran to greet the elderly couple, who looked amazed at the transformation of the lot. "This is incredible," Clara exclaimed, her eyes shining with emotion. "You're not only feeding people's stomachs but also their souls." Antonio nodded solemnly. "Lucas, my boy, you took our small seed of gratitude and turned it into something truly extraordinary." As they showed Antonio and Clara around the garden, Lucas felt a deep sense of accomplishment. What had started as an impulsive act of kindness had turned into something much bigger. He looked at Beatrice, who was smiling as she enthusiastically explained the different herbs they had planted, and felt his heart fill with an emotion he wasn't ready to name yet. That night, lying in bed, Lucas reflected on the events of the past few months. The loss of Sophia, which once seemed so devastating, now felt like a necessary turning point in his life. He had found purpose, made new connections, and perhaps most importantly, stayed true to his values. As sleep enveloped him, Lucas smiled, eager for what the future might bring. He didn't know that his journey was far from over, and that the challenges and joys awaiting him would be even greater than he could imagine. Years passed, and Lucas grew, carrying with him the lessons and values he had learned in his youth. Now at 25, he had become a young entrepreneur, determined to make a difference in the business world in an ethical and sustainable way. The community garden that had started as a small project in his teenage years had expanded into a network of urban gardens throughout the city, providing fresh food to local schools and charities. Lucas managed this project in his spare time, but his main focus was on his green technology startup, which developed innovative solutions to reduce food waste. On a fall morning, Lucas received a call that would change the course of his life once again. It was Clara, her voice trembling on the phone. "Lucas, dear," she said. "Antonio, He passed away last night. The shock of the news hit Lucas like a punch to the stomach. Antonio and Clara had become important figures in his life over the years, almost like surrogate grandparents. The loss of Antonio was deeply painful. "Clara, I'm so sorry," Lucas replied, his voice choked. "Is there anything I can do?" "Actually, yes," Clara responded. "Antonio left something for you. He wanted you to come pick it up personally." Intrigued and emotional, Lucas promised to visit Clara that very afternoon. When he arrived at the familiar home, he found Clara sitting on the porch, her eyes tired, but with a gentle smile on her face. "Ah, Lucas," she said, embracing him warmly. "How you've grown. Antonio would be so proud to see the man you've become." Inside the house, Clara handed Lucas a sealed envelope. "Antonio prepared this a few months ago when his health started to decline," she explained. "He wanted to make sure it reached you." With trembling hands, Lucas opened the envelope. Inside, there was a letter and some legal documents. As he read the letter, his eyes widened in surprise. "Dear Lucas," the letter began, in Antonio's firm handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I am no longer in this world. But don't be sad, for I lived a full and happy life, especially in recent years, thanks largely to you. You may not know, but Clara and I had no children. Over the years, we built a small business empire, nothing grand, but solid and prosperous. We always wondered what would happen to all this when we were gone. When you came into our lives that day at the restaurant, something changed. We saw in you not only kindness, but also vision and determination. We watched with pride as you grew and became the incredible man you are today. So, Lucas, we decided to leave our legacy to you. The included documents transfer our shares in various companies to your name, as well as some investments. Use them wisely, continue to do good, and inspire others as you inspired us. With eternal love and gratitude, Antonio." Lucas looked at Clara, stunned. I can't accept this," he stammered. Clara smiled, taking his hands. "You can and you must, dear. Antonio and I talked a lot about this. There's no one we trust more to continue our legacy." In the days that followed, Lucas found himself immersed in a world of responsibilities he had never imagined. Antonio and Clara's businesses were diverse, from a small publishing house to a handcrafted furniture factory. Each had its own story and dedicated employees who depended on its success. Determined to honor the trust placed in him, Lucas dove headfirst into the challenge. He spent months learning about each business, listening to the employees, and seeking ways to modernize operations without losing the essence that made them special. One night, exhausted after a long day of meetings, Lucas received an unexpected message. It was Beatrice, his teenage friend with whom he had lost touch in recent years. "Hey, stranger. I heard you're shaking up the business world over here. How about a coffee to catch up?" Lucas smiled, feeling a wave of nostalgia and something else he couldn't quite define. He quickly responded, setting up a meeting for the next day. As he prepared for bed, Lucas reflected on the incredible journey his life had become. From a simple act of kindness in a restaurant, he now found himself in a position to make a real difference in the world. And with Beatrice back in his life, who knew what new adventures awaited? With a smile on his lips, Lucas fell asleep, eager for what the future might hold. The next morning, Lucas woke up with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. The coffee with Beatrice made him feel as if he were back in his teenage years, with butterflies in his stomach. He carefully chose his clothes, a light blue shirt that accentuated his eyes and well-tailored dark pants. The cafe they had chosen was a small, cozy establishment in the city center, known for its organic beans and tranquil atmosphere. Lucas arrived a few minutes early, choosing a table near the window. His eyes anxiously darted to the door each time it opened. Finally, Beatrice walked in. The years had been kind to her. Her wild curls were now tamed in a chic cut framing her face, and her eyes sparkled with the same vivacity Lucas remembered. She saw him and broke into a radiant smile, walking toward him. "Lucas," she exclaimed, hugging him warmly. "It's been so long." The hug lasted a bit longer than necessary, and when they pulled away, both seemed slightly flushed. "B," Lucas smiled, pulling out a chair for her. "You look amazing." They ordered their coffees and soon were immersed in an animated conversation, catching up on the years that had passed. Beatrice shared that she had graduated in environmental law and now worked for an NGO focused on sustainability. "And you," she said, leaning forward with interest. "I heard you became a big-time entrepreneur overnight. How did that happen?" Lucas hesitated for a moment before telling the story of Antonio and Clara and the unexpected inheritance. Beatrice listened intently, her eyes widening in surprise. "Wow, Lucas," she said when he finished. "That's incredible. But you know what? I'm not really surprised. You've always been someone special, always putting others first. If anyone deserves an opportunity like this, it's you." Her words warmed Lucas's heart. "Thank you, B. That means a lot coming from you." There was a moment of charged silence between them, their gazes meeting over their coffee cups. Lucas felt the same warmth he had experienced years ago, working side by side in the community garden. "So," Beatrice broke the silence, a mischievous glint in her eyes, "what do you plan to do with this entire business empire?" Lucas smiled, leaning forward with enthusiasm. "Actually, I have a few ideas. I want to transform these businesses, make them more sustainable and socially responsible. But I need help, someone who understands environmental law and sustainable practices." He left the sentence hanging, looking significantly at Beatrice. She raised an eyebrow, a smile forming on her lips. "Mr. Entrepreneur, that sounds suspiciously like a job offer." Lucas laughed. "Maybe it is. What do you think? Would you like to join me on this journey?" Beatrice pretended to think for a moment before grinning widely. "You know what? I think I'd love to." In the weeks that followed, Lucas and Beatrice worked tirelessly to implement changes in the businesses. They introduced sustainable practices in the furniture factory, transformed the publishing house into a platform for underrepresented voices, and expanded the Urban Garden project. As they worked together, their old friendship quickly evolved into something deeper. Late nights at the office turned into late dinners, and business discussions often transformed into personal conversations that lasted until dawn. One day, while walking together in the park after a particularly stressful meeting, Lucas suddenly stopped, turning to Beatrice. "B," he said, his voice serious, "I want to thank you. Not just for the amazing work you're doing, but for being by my side in this crazy journey." Beatrice smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "Lucas, there's no other place I'd rather be." In that moment, under the golden light of the sunset, Lucas leaned in and kissed her gently. It was a kiss full of promises of a shared future and dreams realized together. As they walked back to the office hand in hand, Lucas thought about how his life had changed. From a teenager who sacrificed a birthday gift to help strangers, he had become a man capable of making a difference on a much larger scale. And now, with Beatrice by his side, he felt he could face any challenge the future might bring. Antonio and Clara's legacy lived not only in the businesses they had left, but in the spirit of kindness and compassion they had inspired in Lucas. And now, with Beatrice, that legacy would continue to grow and flourish, touching even more lives in the years to come. In the months that followed, Lucas and Beatrice became an unstoppable force. Together, they not only transformed the inherited businesses, but also created a business model that inspired other corporations to follow their lead. The furniture factory, once known only locally, was now recognized internationally for its line of eco-friendly products. Using reclaimed wood and innovative low-carbon production techniques, the company had become a symbol of sustainability in the industry. The small publishing house was completely reinvented. Under Lucas and Beatrice's direction, it specialized in publishing works by authors from marginalized communities, giving voice to stories that rarely found space in the traditional publishing market. The success was so great that they soon were launching bestsellers and winning literary awards. But the project that touched Lucas's heart the most was still the Urban Garden Network. What had started as a small garden behind the school had now expanded throughout the city, turning vacant lots into productive green oases. The gardens not only provided fresh food for the community, but also became centers for environmental education and gathering places for residents. One day, while walking through one of these gardens, now a lush community park, Beatrice turned to Lucas with a sparkle in her eyes. "Remember when we started this? We were just two teenagers with a shovel and a lot of dreams." Lucas smiled, recalling those days. "Yes, and look at what it's become. It's amazing to think about how many lives we've touched since then." At that moment, an idea began to form in Lucas's mind. He turned to Beatrice, holding her hands. "B, what if we could do this on a national scale? No, international. Imagine gardens like this in every city, in every underserved neighborhood." Beatrice's eyes widened at the boldness of the idea. "Lucas, that would be huge. You're talking about real systemic change." "Exactly." Lucas nodded, his enthusiasm growing. "We could create a foundation, use the resources we have to start projects in other cities, train community leaders, provide the tools and knowledge needed." Beatrice smiled, already catching Lucas's vision. "And we could integrate this with our other businesses. The publishing house could release urban gardening manuals. The furniture factory could produce sustainable equipment for the gardens." "Exactly," Lucas exclaimed, hugging Beatrice with excitement. "That's what Antonio and Clara wanted when they left me this inheritance. Not just to run businesses, but to truly make a difference." In the following months, Lucas and Beatrice worked tirelessly to bring this vision to life. They created the Seeds of Tomorrow Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to spreading the urban garden and community sustainability model worldwide. The foundation's launch attracted national and international attention. Journalists from around the globe came to Porto Sereno to see the original project and interview the visionary couple behind it. During one of these interviews, Lucas found himself reflecting deeply on his journey. "You know," he told the journalist, "it all started with a simple act of kindness. I was just a kid who decided to help an elderly couple in a restaurant. I never could have imagined where it would lead me." Intrigued, the journalist asked Lucas to elaborate. "That moment taught me that our actions, no matter how small, can have a huge impact. That couple, Antonio and Clara, they changed my life. And now, through their legacy, we're changing other lives." Beatrice, sitting beside Lucas, took his hand and smiled. "And the most amazing part is that it doesn't stop there. Every person touched by this project, every community that gains a garden, in turn inspires and helps others. It's a domino effect of kindness and positive change." As the Seeds of Tomorrow Foundation grew, Lucas and Beatrice traveled the world, starting projects in slums in Rio de Janeiro, underserved neighborhoods in Mumbai, rural communities in Africa, and even in major metropolises like New York and London. In every place they visited, they didn't just set up gardens, they also trained local leaders, empowering communities to become self-sufficient and sustainable. One day, back in Porto Sereno after a long trip, Lucas took Beatrice to a special place, the old Carlitos restaurant where it all began. The establishment had changed hands over the years but still retained much of its original charm. "B," Lucas said, holding her hands as they stood in front of the restaurant. "This is where my life changed. This is where I learned the power of a kind act. And it's because of this that I ended up meeting you, that we ended up building all of this together." Beatrice smiled, her eyes shining with tears of emotion. "And look at us now. Who would have thought that the kid who spent his girlfriend's birthday money to help strangers would end up changing the world?" Lucas laughed softly. "Well, I wouldn't say we're changing the world, just planting seeds of change, one garden at a time." At that moment, Lucas knelt down, pulling out a small box from his pocket. "Beatrice, you have been my partner in all of this. In fact, you've been so much more than that. You're my inspiration, my strength, my love. Will you marry me?" With tears in her eyes and a radiant smile, Beatrice replied, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." As they embraced, with the sun setting behind them, Lucas thought about how his life had unfolded. From an impulsive act of kindness to a global network of positive change. From a confused young man to a purposeful man. And now, with Beatrice by his side, he knew this was just the beginning of their journey together. Months later, on a beautiful spring day, Lucas and Beatrice married in an intimate ceremony held at the largest community garden in Porto Sereno. Surrounded by friends, family, and community members whose lives they had touched, they exchanged vows of eternal love and commitment not only to each other, but to the world they were working to improve. Clara, now an elderly lady but still full of life, was there to witness the union. With tears in her eyes, she embraced the couple after the ceremony. "Antonio would be so proud," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You both took what he started and turned it into something beyond our wildest dreams." Lucas hugged Clara warmly. "None of this would have been possible without you. The kindness you showed that day in the restaurant, it's still multiplying." As the sun set over the celebration, Lucas and Beatrice stepped aside for a moment, watching their guests laughing and chatting among the rows of vegetables and herbs. "So, Mrs. Seeds of Tomorrow," Lucas teased, using the affectionate nickname they had created. "Ready for the next chapter?" Beatrice smiled, placing a hand on her still flat belly. "More than ready. I can't wait to see what kind of world our little sprout will inherit." Lucas's eyes widened, the realization hitting him. "You mean?" Beatrice nodded, her eyes sparkling. "Yes, we're going to have our own little gardener soon." Embracing his wife with joy, Lucas felt a wave of gratitude and hope wash over him. The journey that began with a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a life of purpose, love, and positive impact. And now, with a new family member on the way, the future seemed brighter than ever. As they returned to the party, hand in hand and hearts full, Lucas knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, always guided by compassion and a desire to make the world a better place, one seed at a time. Feeling inspired by Lucas and Beatrice's incredible journey? Don't miss out on more heartwarming stories and life-changing ideas. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest videos. Want to dive deeper into more inspiring stories? Click the card on your screen now to explore another video that will touch your heart and ignite your passion for change.